Afternoon, everyone. The module that we will discuss today is Module 9, which is Nature and Concepts in SAMP, and it will be reported by Group 10. Nature and Concepts in SAMP. First is census. A census or complete enumeration involves the collection of data from every element of the population. So census, it is a procedure systematically calculating, acquiring, and recording information about the members of a given population. So yung census, it is a collection of data or information sa lahat ng members dun sa isang population. So we can use census if we want to gather information accurately. And if the number of population is not too large, then it is not need to use census. Examples in Figure 1, in classroom setting, the teacher can conduct a census to determine the number of students who prepare an open book instead of closed book examination by asking each student to write his preference on a piece of paper. Another example in Figure 2, in an office setting, the presidents of the small company can conduct a census to study the employees' opinions and sentiments regarding issues on standard operating procedures by simply sending the questionnaires to each one of its employees through email. So it is advantageous to do a census because it provides us with complete information about the population. There is no need to make inferences about the population because we have available data from all the elements of the population. However, it becomes increasingly more expensive and more time-consuming to conduct a census as the number of elements in the population increases. In fact, very few organizations have enough resources to do a census. Instead of conducting a census, most organizations option to use samples in their studies for the following reasons. So to define sample, it is a group of people, objects, or items that are taken from a larger population for measurement. The sample should be representative of the population to ensure that we can generalize the findings from the research sample to the population as a whole. So first reason, something is more economical. It is more economical because you can only choose sample members or representative in the given population. Second, the study based on a sample requires less time to accomplish. Since it has a representative in a given population, it requires less time to study. Something allows for a wider scope for the study because it can acquire more information in different population. 4 is it can be accurate when the study is based on a sample. Number 5, something is sometimes the only feasible method. Something allows large-scale research to be carried out with a more realistic cost and time frame because it uses a smaller number of individuals in the population with representative to stand in for the work. Definition 1, which is target population and sample population. Target population is the population we want to study. So the target population is the entire population or group that a researcher is interested in researching and analyzing. While sample population is the population from where we actually select the sample. A sample is the specific group that you will collect data from. Ideally, the target and sample populations should be the same collection of elements. Whatever generalization we make using the sample will merely apply to the sample population. If the sample population coincides with the target populations, then we can extend the generalizations on the sample population to the target population, which is the true population of interest. There are some instances when it's difficult to select the sample from the desired target population. In such cases, the target and sample population will be different from each other. So example, in Figure 3, consider the case where the target population is the collection of all residents in Metro Manila. So if we select our sample from the names listed in the telephone directory, then the sample population is the collection of all people listed in the directory. So this collection will be very different from the target population because the The telephone directory does not include many residents in Metro Manila, particularly those who do not have any telephone landline. For the definition 2, which is elementary unit or element and sampling unit. Elementary unit or element is a member of the population whose measurement on the variable of interest is what we wish to examine. And sampling unit is a unit of the population that we select in our sample. So example, in figure 4, industries, a survey conducted by the National Statistics Office, now Philippine Statistics Authority, in cooperation with the Department of Trade and Industry, to provide an actual illustration where the elementary unit and the sampling unit are different from each other. For the title of the study, it is Monthly Integrated Survey of Selected Industries. So the target population is sets of all establishments in manufacturing, mining, and agriculture industries. So for elementary unit, an establishment which is an economic unit that engage under a single ownership or control in one or predominantly one kind of economic activity at a fixed single physical location in manufacturing, mining, and agriculture industries. So for sampling unit as enterprise, which is an economic unit with one or more establishments under a single ownership or control in manufacturing, mining, and agriculture industries.
Right, so now we are in the definition 3, which is sampling frame or frame. So it is a list or map showing all the sampling units in the population. So the example for this one is, suppose an investigator wants to estimate the average income of fishing cooperatives in the country. So the target population for this one is setting all of fishing cooperatives in the country. So basically we must get first, how many or what is the estimated population of all the fishing cooperatives for us to be able to see and know what will be the average income of all the fishing cooperatives in our country. So for the definition 4 about sampling error and non-sampling error, so it was understood basically on the statement below here about sampling error is the error attributed to the variation present among the computed values of the statistic from the different possible samples consisting of n elements, while the non-sampling error is the error from the other sources, from other sources apart from sampling fluctuations. So basically, the sampling error, the error for this one is already been seeing about from the percent among computed values. So we can already see the errors on our presented computed values, while our non-sampling error is the error that we can see from other sources apart from sampling fluctuations. So the sampling errors occurs when we collect data from the sample and not from all the elements in the population. So it is an error innate in results based from a sample. In contrast, results of a census do not have any sampling errors. This is because the population itself is the only possible collection containing n elements, and we measure the variable interest from all of the n elements in the population when we conduct a census. So this does not imply that census results will be error-free. So it can have non-sampling errors or errors that we cannot attribute to sampling. Both results from a census and from a sample can have non-sampling errors. So it is a lot more difficult to manage non-sampling errors in a census, particularly when the population is very large. We also have here this classification of non-sampling errors, wherein there's a measurement error that we call, wherein this is the difference between the true value of the variable and the observed value used in the study. So this occurs when we are using a faulty measurement instrument, or when we do not use the instrument properly. So there's two types of this measurement errors, wherein this is the instrument error, which is the error in the design of the questionnaire. So yeah, basically it was understood that there's a wrong process of using the instrument for this one. So there's an error that was happening with this instrument error. So second one is this response error, wherein there's an error that represent a lack of accuracy in our responses to the question. So this can be classified as response bias, wherein when the respondents does not give the truthful answer, and this non-response bias, wherein when the respondents doesn't know the answer or simply refuses to answer the certain question. So it's really happening. I mean, with my experience in doing a survey, when I was in my senior high school, there's really this kind of situation about this response error. We also have this processing error, wherein there's an incorrect input of data recorded in the questionnaire into the computer. So yeah, it really happens exactly when I experienced doing survey in our senior high school. So also this interview error, it occurs when the field enumerator asks the questions in a manner wherein the enumerator already influences the reply of responders. So basically, this is like parang bias din na nangyayari. So lastly, this surrogate information error. So it is the use of the wrong variable to measure the concept under study. So yeah, we also have this error in the implementation of the sampling design, wherein it occurs when we do not adhere to the procedures and requirements specified in the sampling design. So yeah, it really happens if we're not responsible enough in if we're not disciplined enough to just if we're not disciplined enough to just follow the procedures and requirements that was specified on that design. So we also have these types of error in the implementation of this sampling design. First is the selection error. It is an error that occurs in sampling when the researcher is pursuing sampling procedures that are either improper or incomplete. Next one is this frame error. It is an error caused by a sampling frame that is not a perfect presentation of the population or universe. And lastly, for this population specification error, this error occurs when the researcher does not understand who they should survey. So yeah, it also happened about this population specification error when you don't know the target people that should be on that specific survey. Like for example, you did a survey about experiencing doing a research. So basically, in our high school life, doing a research, basically our senior high school are the ones who are already doing that one. And yeah, there's an error if the population, I mean the people that you wanted to do a survey is an high school student only. So this is just an example of this population specification error.
Advantages of sampling. Sampling ensures convenience, collection of intensive and exhaustive data, suitability and limited resources, and better report. In addition to this, sampling has the following advantages also. When we say sampling, it can define as procedure in which a sample is selected from an individual or group of people for a certain kind of research purposes. So, napakalaking tulong ng sampling sa mga researcher kasi mas napapadali nito yung pagkakandak natin ng study, which is reliable kasi kumukuha lang tayo ng estimated target respondent from the entire population to answer our questions or survey. So, let's proceed to the some advantages of sampling. First is we have a low cost of sampling. If data were to be collected for the entire population, the cost will be quite high. A sample is a small proportion of a population, so the cost will be lower if data is collected for a sample of population, which is a big advantage. So, kapag kumuha tayo ng data from the entire population, mas mataas yung cost at mas time-consuming yon sa mga researcher. Kasi once na nagkakandak tayo ng study, pag marami tayong respondent, marami rin tayong questionnaire na kailangang i-print out. Pero kapag gumamit naman tayo ng sample, Mas mababa yung cost kasi dito, kumukuha lang tayo ng small proportion from the entire population, sila na yung magiging respondent natin. So, mas mapapadali yung pagkakandak natin ng study, which is a big advantage sa mga researcher. Additional, low cost is one of the main reasons why researchers adopt this technique. Samples are readily available to the researcher. They do not move around too much for data collection. Second is less time consuming in sampling. Use of sampling takes less time also. It consumes less time than census technique. Tabulation, analysis, etc. take much less time in the case of a sample than in the case of population. So, another benefit of sampling is makakasave tayo ng time in doing research. So, much better na gumamit tayo ng sample rather than case of population kasi in terms of sample, we must get our target respondent, which is sila na yung magiging official respondent natin na sasagot sa ating mga katanungan, so hindi masyadong hassle pagdating sa time. The third one is scope of sampling is high. The investigator is concerned with generalization of data. To study a whole population in order to arrive at generalization would be impractical. Some populations are so large that their characteristics could not be measured. Before the measurement has been completed, the population would have changed. So, dahil malaki yung scope ng population, hindi lahat ng data ay naisasama or na-measured. Dahil dito, nagkakaroon ng invalid information, which is critical kasi nagkakaroon ng conflict pagdating sa result once na nagre-record tayo ng data. And besides, pwede ring mabias yung research mo. Next is accuracy of data is high. Having drawn a sample and computed the desired descriptive statistic, it is possible to determine the stability of the obtained sample value. A sample represents the population from which it is drawn. It permits a high degree of accuracy due to a limited area of operations. When we say high accuracy of data, the source of information is reliable. Dito rin napapatunayan ng mga researcher na ang kanilang study ay valid and free from biases and error. Another is organization of convenience. Organizational problems involved in sampling are very few. Since sample is a small size, vast facilities are not required. Sampling is therefore economical in respect of resources. Study of sample involves less space and equipment. So when we say organizational, it's convenient for the business and market research. In this case, may ma-encounter tayo na some of the problems in sampling kasi minsan nagkakaroon ng mga error na hindi natin may iwasan when it comes in conducting the study. Pero hindi naman ganun ka-persistent kasi very helpful naman yung sampling and convenient siya kasi accessible siya sa mga researcher. The next one is intensive and exhaustive data. In sample studies, measurement or observations are made by limited number. So, intensive and exhaustive data are collected. So, sa pagko-collect natin ng data, kailangan talaga masinsinan. Kasi titignan natin lahat ng aspect or factor na related sa study natin. Hindi tayo pwedeng basta-basta mag-record without basis and valid evidence. Although nakakapagod talaga, kaya much better na gumamit tayo ng technique kasi in terms of intensive, nag-i-examine at nag-observe tayo. When it comes naman sa exhaustive, all possible response are captured by the response available. So, kailangan talaga useful. Next is suitable in limited resources. The resources available within an organization may be limited. Studying the entire universe is not viable. Use of sampling is an appropriate strategy while conducting marketing research. So every study has limitations due to some factors that can affect the finding of your study. Kapag pinag-aralan natin yung entire population, hindi siya ganon ka-reliable dahil limited lang yung resources. So we better use sampling to cover up the appropriate number of our respondent. Kasi once na gumamit tayo ng sampling technique, makakakuha tayo ng richer data, even the resources are limited. And additional, sampling is crucial for marketing research because it helps organization to stay connected with its customers for the requirements, needs, and feedback which is valuable for every business and organization to grow in their competitive market. And the last one is better rapport. An effective research study requires a good rapport between the researcher and the respondent. So, yung better rapport plays a large role in conducting research kasi dito makikita natin yung successful communication between the researcher and the respondent. And additional lang din, once na nakikipag-interact tayo sa mga respondent is kinakailangan very accommodating. Sabihin natin yung role nila sa pagkakandak natin ng study and huwag tayong gagawa ng pwede nilang ika-distract, especially dapat maging formal tayo and ipakita natin yung interest natin sa kanila while communicating. By having a good rapport with participant, it may give better information and data access for the researcher due to the trust and understanding built as a result by having a good relationship between both of them. Manageable samples permit the researcher to establish adequate rapport with the respondent. So kung mapapansin natin sa mga questionnaire, yung mga personal information ng ating mga respondent is optional. Kasi dito pinapangalagaan natin yung confidentiality and privacy nila for their protection.
Limitation of sampling. The reliability of the sample depends upon the appropriateness of the sampling method used. The purpose of sampling theory is to make sampling more efficient, but the real difficulties lie in selection, estimation, and administration of samples. Sinasabi dyan na yung result ng sample and its reliability is depende sa sampling method na ginamit. And take note na kapag hindi na plano na maayos ang isang sampling procedure, possible na yung makuhang result ay hindi reliable. Saka isa pang limitation ng sampling is that kapag yung sample is hindi napili ng maayos, yung conclusion mula sa sample na yon ay magiging misleading. And kapag magkakandak ka ng sampling, dapat ang mga taong gagawa ay knowledgeable enough to do it. Yung mga taong well-experienced, kasi kapag hindi sila ang gagawa, yung result magiging unbelievable. Sometimes, bias din naman yung sampling kasi bias selection ang ginagawa and may possibility na mag-lead sa mga maling conclusion. Number 1. Chances of bias. The serious limitation of the sampling method is that it involves bias selection and thereby leads us to draw erroneous conclusions. Bias arises when the method of selection of sample employed is faulty. Relative small samples properly selected may be much more reliable than large samples poorly selected. Katulad nga ng nabanggit ko kanina, itong una is about bias selection and pwedeng mag-lead sa maling conclusion. Mas reliable yung small sample pero properly selected compared to large sample na hindi naman maayos yung pagkakapili. 2. Difficulties in selecting a truly representative sample. Difficulties in selecting a truly representative sample produce reliable and accurate result only when they are representative of the whole group. Selection of a truly representative sample is difficult when the phenomena under study are of a complex nature. Selecting good sample is difficult. Ito naman yung mahirap na pagpili ng tamang representative ng sample. Lalo na kapag malaki o malawak yung sakop ng study. And sa totoo lang, mahirap pumili ng magandang sample. 3. Inadequate knowledge in the subject. Use of sampling method requires adequate subject-specific knowledge in sampling technique. Sampling involves statistical analysis and calculation of probable error. When the researcher lacks specialized knowledge in sampling, he may commit serious mistakes. Consequently, the result of the study will be misleading. Yun nga, ang researcher o ang taong dapat na mag-conduct ng sampling is knowledgeable enough kasi kung kulang siya sa kaalaman, pwedeng mag-lead sa mga maling result dahil it is more on statistic and calculation sa mga possible errors. 4. Changeability of units. When the units of the population are not inhomogeneous, the sampling technique will be unscientific. In sampling, though the number of cases is small, it not always easy to stick to the selected cases. The units of sample may be widely dispersed. Some of the cases of sample may not cooperate with the researcher, and some others may be inaccessible because of these problems. All the cases may not be taken up. The selected cases may have to be replaced by other cases. Changeability of units stands in the way of results of the study. Sinasabi na for some events kasi yung mga small samples na may not yield sufficient or enough cases para sa study. At yung mga cases na yon pwede siyang mapalitan ng ibang cases. Number 5. Impossibility of sampling. Deriving a representative sample is difficult when the universe is too small or too heterogeneous. In this case, census study is the only alternative. Moreover, in studies requiring a very high standard of accuracy, the sampling method may be unsuitable. There will be chances of errors even if samples are drawn most carefully. Actually, mahirap talaga makakuha ng representative ng sample. Especially, sometimes yung population kasi is too small or too large, pero may alternative naman. At census study yung pwedeng gamitin, which is ito yung complete enumeration or complete count ng population. Sa study na yan din kasi, kailangan na accuracy, pero hindi maiwasan yung mga chances of errors.